Throughout his career in all top 3 series of NASCAR, Jebediah Townhouse Burton has had an interesting career no matter who he drove for, no matter what series he's in. Unlike those that came before or after him, he drove for a litany of teams. From top tier equipment that had the capabilities of winning championships, to backmarker teams that had the capability of winning Brock Beard's NASCAR championship. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked. Who was this driver from Halifax, Virginia? Why was he disliked by most fans? And how come he couldn't keep a ride for some point? All that will be answered right here, right now on another one of my videos. And I do want to apologize if my voice sounds a bit nasally. That's because the allergies are kicking my ass right now, so there's that. Townhouse started his journey up the ladder in 2008 at the age of 16 by racing in the NASCAR Whelen All-American Series at the South Boston Speedway in his hometown of Halifax. After getting bit by the racing bug, he would attempt the full-time season the next year in 2009. The following year in 2010, he picked up Rookie of the Year honors after racing late models. The following year in 2011, he made his ARCA debut at Berlin Raceway, where he would start 9th and finish 21st for Eddie Sharp Racing in the number 6 car. His debut would only last 120 laps as he was sidelined with a sway bar problem. The next year in 2012, Burton made 3 starts in the Rev Oil Pro Cup Series, and in his first start, he won at Radford in the number 33 car. He would make 2 more starts, scoring a 3rd and 9th in the number 36 car. His part-time efforts weren't just limited to racing late models. It was also around this time that he made the jump to the top 3 divisions of NASCAR. A few months prior to his first Rev Oil Pro Cup race, he made his Truck Series debut in Martinsville for owner Mike Hillman, the same man that fielded his dad in the 27 truck at the season opener race at Daytona. Jebediah Townhouse finished 13th in his debut and would go on to finish inside the top 15 in 3 of his 5 starts. His only wreck was in his 3rd start at Kansas. On only lap 1, he hit the wall off of turn 4, and going into the first turn on the 2nd lap, his tire would blow, hitting the outside wall and ending up with a last place finish. His only top 10 finish was at Charlotte in his penultimate race for Hillman. The reason why this was his second to last start was because of a lack of sponsorship. This meant that his 19th place finish at Dover was his final start for Hillman. And then after that, Hillman started to shop for drivers that didn't have the last name of Burton. Despite being let go, Townhouse's career looked promising. From his first top 10 in trucks to his first win in the Pro Cup Series, this garnered the attention of teams in the Truck Series. And one of those teams was a championship caliber one in the form of Turner Scott Motorsports. He would be paired up with Nelson Piquet Jr., Miguel Paludo, and the 2012 Truck Series champion, James Buescher. The truck he would drive would be the number 4 truck that made 8 starts with 5 different drivers: Casey Kane, Kyle Larson, Augie Grill, Dakota Armstrong, and Brandon McReynolds. Despite Kane winning a race at Rockingham, Larson showed what this entry could do by scoring the most top 10s, with 3 adding in a top 5 at Phoenix. Another top 5 at Homestead was in arm's reach until he and Ty Dillon got together in turn 3. He had the right team, but he wasn't going to be running a blank truck, right? There wasn't any word of what his sponsor would be until January 9th of 2013, where electronic cigarette brand Arrowhead would be his primary sponsor for all 22 races. And in his first season in the top 3 series of NASCAR, he did very well for himself. In the first 6 races, he scored the pole in half of them. This was an amazing accomplishment, but his biggest highlight would come in the 7th race of the season. Before the infamous repave, Texas Motor Speedway was a fairly light track on the NASCAR calendar, but unlike the Xfinity and Cup Series, this track hosted a standalone event in June, while the Cup Series were off in Pocono and Xfinity in Iowa. Jeb started 3rd in this race, and as the green flag flew, he didn't have the fastest truck initially. The beginning of the race saw him in 6th place, but around lap 41, he passed his teammate Miguel Paludo for 5th place. But just as soon as his truck comes to life, Chad Hockenbrock in the Kyle Busch Motorsports 51 truck brought out the first caution, trying to avoid the 10 of Jennifer Jo Cobb. Speaking of KBM trucks running into problems, Joey Coulter in the 18 would wreck out in turn 3 a few laps later after the restart. Despite these 2 being taken out, Bubba Wallace was the only KBM driver to not wreck out, as he would go on to finish 6th. And speaking of 6th, the Towns found himself in that exact same spot after falling back. Up to this point, he struggled on the restarts, but the restart after Coulter's crash saw him up to 4th, a net gain of the restart prior. As the long run started to commence, he would lose the spot to Ron Hornaday a few laps later, but on lap 67, he was able to drive by Hornaday without any issues. And then to add even more veterans getting passed by Townhouse, he would pass Matt Craft on lap 87. He would stay in 3rd until the first round of green flag pit stops on lap 100, where the crew addressed the looseness of his truck. And after everything cycled out, he found himself in a familiar 4th spot. But he would drive up to 3rd with 46 laps to go, and at this point, Townhouse had a great long run truck. But this long green flag run would get disrupted one last time as the Martinsville wall rider himself, Ross Chastain, brought out the final yellow. and as the trucks finished up their pit stops, Townhouse would exit second off pit road. This played a vital role in the ensuing restart, as for the first time all night, he would be starting on the front row alongside Ty Dillon. And then the green flag flew.
Look at Matt Crafton.
Look at Bubba Wallace, makes it 3 wide now.
That's what Matt was thinking about. Bubba made it happen. He got on the inside of Kuroga. And look at the top. These guys are really going for it now, baby.
Jeb Burton with a great restart. Had struggled earlier on the restarts. Now trying to take the lead away from Ty Dillon.
Even though he passed Matt Crafton for second place with 18 laps to go and running the exact same lap time as the Ford truck, he would have nothing to show for it, as the Townhouse will lead the remaining 24 laps en route to his first Truck Series win.
Jeb Burton, just 0.3 of a second in front of Ty Dillon the last time they went across the stripe. Ty Dillon goes the high side. Burton down low, looking for his first win. Coming out of turn number 4. Jeb Burton's going to hold up Ty Dillon. Burton wins at Texas.
Overall, his 2013 season was a good start, with his first win, 5 top 5s, and 11 top 10s. His win wasn't his last highlight, as the Townhouse drove a 4 Steve Turner car in his Xfinity Series debut at Kentucky, finishing 8th. While this race was the last with Marty Reed's partnership with ESPN, it seemed like the Townhouse and Steve Turner were set for the future. That was until January 1st of 2014. His sponsor, Arrowhead Electronic Cigarettes, that funded his entire 2013 season, abruptly pulled their sponsorship from the Ford truck. The reason was because the sponsor defaulted on their payments, which led to the closure of the number 4 team. While the situation was bad on its own, it wouldn't take long as another top-tier truck team signed him, as Thor Sport Racing signed him to race the 13 truck full-time. Compared to his previous ride, the 13 truck didn't have any noteworthy results. Their best finish came with Todd Bodine, finishing 11th in back-to-back races at Daytona and Martinsville. But outside of that, their finishes were either inside the top 15 or outside of the top 15. Townhouse was racing in a second entry that had not so stellar results, with once again another vape sponsor for some reason being the primary sponsor. He needed to do the same thing as his previous ride so he could show that the 13 is worthy of pulling top-tier worthy results just like the 88. But instead, the 2014 season was nothing but regression on both parties. While Matt Crafton won his second title, Townhouse finished 8th in points, and compared to Johnny Sauter's 2012 season, it was a small improvement. But it was still disappointing, as he had 3 less top 5s, 4 less top 10s, and no wins despite finishing second at Texas after a wreck on the last lap. Overall, 2014 was not a good season. It was a season of regression. Outside of finishing 15th for Fred Biaggi in the Xfinity race at Charlotte, 2014 was not a good year. And neither was 2015. On January 28th of the new year, JC reported that due to a lack of sponsorship, Townhouse would once again be out of a ride. But just like the year prior, it wouldn't take long for him to join a new ride. But instead of the Truck Series, he jumped straight to the NASCAR Cup Series. 13 days before the Daytona 500, it was reported that the Townhouse would race for BK Racing full-time, with his announcement taking place at the NASCAR Hall of Fame of all places. The Townhouse went from racing in top truck teams with different results to joining what was essentially a backmarker team in the Cup Series. He said Cole went to Front Row Motorsports and finished higher in points at the Townhouse. And speaking of Townhouse, why don't we just talk about his 2015 season, shall we? It was a disaster if you couldn't have guessed already. Compared to a season ago where Witt made all the races, Townhouse only made 28. Witt had an average finish of 29.3, while the Townhouse had an abysmal average finish of 36.3. He finished 38th in points compared to Witt's 31st place the previous season. While his season was dreadful, he wasn't given any lofty expectations. What could have saved his 2015 season was a full-time ride in the Trucks or Xfinity series instead of drowning in a backmarker team. And speaking of trucks, he made a one-off start for Dale Jr.'s 00 entry at Texas, but could only muster a 16th place finish. When the one-off was announced, he was unsure of his 2016 plans, and this uncertainty would be amplified in January the next year as David Reagan would pilot the number 23 full-time, which once again left Townhouse out of a ride. Luckily, on February 7th, it was announced that the Townhouse would drive for Richard Petty Motorsports. Not the 44 in the Cup Series, but the 43 in the Xfinity Series. Up to this point, he only ran 2 full-time seasons in the Truck Series and 28 Cup races in the previous year. So a full-time offer in the Xfinity Series was bound to happen, right? Overall, his 2016 campaign was looking to be a promising one. He notched a 10th place finish at the second race of the season at Atlanta, and after the first 11 races, he was sitting 11th in points with a shot to make the playoffs. However, this would all change going into the race weekend at Pocono. On June 1st, Richard Petty Motorsports would suspend their Xfinity Series operations due to financial issues. The financial issue stemmed from missed payments from the sponsor Jay Stryker. The Townhouse had sponsors pull out after a season ended, but having a sponsor pull out mid-season causing a team to collapse was a first. Despite his Xfinity Series team withdrawing from the entry list, the Townhouse did find a ride for Pocono in the Cup Series with Go Fast Racing. He would make 2 starts with Go Fast, both at the same track, and would notch a best finish of 29th 5 days after RPM's Xfinity Series team shut down. He eventually returned to the Xfinity Series, racing 3 times for Fred Biaggi, but only having a best finish of 12th at Indianapolis. Heading into 2017, he was still searching for a ride, but a day before the season opener at Daytona, the Townhouse would join JGL Racing on a part-time basis. Even though he still had a ride, this was the lowest point in his career. He was stuck in a mid-pack team with mixed results, and it seemed like things were looking grim. A 29th at Texas and a 26th at Bristol were his first 2 results. He wouldn't even make a start until June 30th at Daytona International Speedway, and his start couldn't have come at a better time, as his teammate Dakota Armstrong was entering 11th in points after a 5th place finish at Iowa. There would even be a 3rd entry as Scott Legacy Jr. would pilot the number 26 car. A perfect storm was brewing for this team. And also with the track, as it would be postponed the next day. But even with the postponement, the goal was still the same, and that was to run well and possibly win. Play the clips.
And right away, the one of Elliott Sadler jumped into that outside line. After William Byron had the lead, Elliott Sadler decided, I'm going to go for this win as well, as they come to the overtime line. Owen wrecking behind them. The field, did they get to the overtime line before the caution came out? That will be the question.
Once the caution came out after the cars crossed that stupid overtime line, Armstrong came out 3rd and the Townhouse 4th. Despite Legacy getting into Garrett Smithley, which wasn't Legacy's fault, it was a near perfect day for the team. While his time with JGL ended abruptly at Bristol with a blown tire and a very pissed off Brendan Gaughan, his finish at Daytona caught the attention of the better Xfinity Series teams, and one of those teams being Richard Childress Racing. On January 24th of 2018, Townhouse would be joined by the Dillon brothers, Shane Lee, and Brendan Gaughan as the ones who would pilot the famous 3-car and select races. He ran 3 races with his first 2 at Richmond at Dover, resulting in 12th place finishes, and on lap 99 at Chicagoland, he was running 13th after the restart. While he wasn't the best driver, he at the very least wasn't a filler, and then they entered turn 3. This brought his time with Childress to an end. However, the big teams of the Xfinity Series were not done with Jebediah Townhouse Burton. Remember during the 2015 season when he drove a one-off start for Dale Jr. in the Truck Series? Well, Jr. no longer has a Truck Series team, but he did have a 4-car fleet in the Xfinity Series. Michael Linett in the 1, Justin Allgaier in the 7, and Noah Gragson in the 9. There was also a 4th and final entry, and that was the number 8 car, which was the first time that Jr. owned the 8 since his Chance 2 Motorsports days. The ride would be using the owner points of Michael Linett's number 5 car that he drove the previous 2 seasons, and on January 25th of 2019, it was revealed that the Townhouse would drive the 8 car in initially 5 races. But as it turned out, he would run 7 events. Both races at Texas, Charlotte, Michigan, Bristol, Indianapolis, and the finale at Homestead. So how did he do? Fantastic. Okay. That may be a stretch, but hear me out. He made the most with his opportunity. Every race was either a top 5 or a top 10. He had an average finish of 10.7, which is almost close to Zane Smith's average finish of 10.3. And because of his stellar performance, he would be brought back to the 8 car the next year in 2020. However, if 2019 was a dream season, 2020 was a straight up reality check. He started out with a wrecked car at Daytona, a wreck at Kentucky, a power steering problem at Indy, a brake issue at Richmond, and finally one last wreck at Texas. While it was a step back compared to the previous year, it's not like he had excellent runs because he clearly did. The day after he had the brake issue at Richmond, he goes on to finish 2nd in the doubleheader weekend, which washed off the bad taste from the previous night. He scored a 4th place finish at Martinsville in his final start with JRM, but by far his most significant highlight of the season was at Talladega Superspeedway on June 20th. Despite starting in 8th place, he fell back to 20th by the time lap 10 rolled around, and as the field went single file as the first yellow flag waved, he was stuck in 21st place. Throughout stage 1, he was running outside the top 10. However, when stage 2 started, he drove his way through the pack, running inside the top 5 before the field started tapeworming. But the choo-choo train was derailed as the bottom lane gained momentum. He would end up 7th at the end of stage 2. So how would stage 3 play out? Well, in terms of the rest of the pack, with multiple wrecks that took out a lot of contenders, The final big wreck that would affect the race involved the 3 JRM drivers, which left the Townhouse on his own. But he wasn't dissuaded by a lack of teammates. He was going for the win with help from Austin Cindric. All that he needed to do was hold off the field.
They make it back to the checker.
And the reason I want to be on the bottom is you see Allmendinger on the outside. He's trying to get to that 100,000. He knows he's probably not going to be able to win this. That outside's going to be broken up a little bit.
Jeb's got a side
block
draft.
both sides here.
Yep.
Chastain leading right now for the dash for cash, but he's got Allmendinger right behind him. Teammates lined up in the outside.
All 3 Colic cars lined up in the outside lane.
Justin Haley taking the lead in the outside lane. The 11 on point. Side by side for second. That's Chastain and Burton. Here comes Allmendinger. Back through the tri-oval. Can Haley control this thing? Yes, he can. First career victory at Talladega. It goes to Justin Haley. Here he is.
Oh, well, I guess teammates mean everything. Oh yeah, on the topic of Colic racing, ever since 2019, they found their groove on the super speedways, with Ross Chastain leading his Colic racing teammates to a 1-2-3 finish at Daytona. Well, at least a 1-2 finish. Ever since then, the three-piece of Chastain, Justin Haley, and AJ Allmendinger have been consistent contenders at the super speedways. Justin Haley even backed up his first win by winning the last 2 super speedway races on the calendar. While the trio were a force to be reckoned with, Ross was set to depart Colic racing at the end of the season to race full-time for Chip Ganassi Racing in the Cup Series. This left the Colic racing number 10 car open without a driver entering 2021. But despite his struggles in 2020, the Talents would join the team on December 18th. But this wasn't a part-time deal, this was a full-time opportunity. The last time he attempted a full season schedule, he was out mid-season. Maybe things will change. Maybe he could run the entire schedule. The Townhouse's first race in the 10 came at the season opener at Daytona. Besides his bumper cover coming off and his future replacement making a late block, he went on to finish a solid 4th place, which was followed up with another top 5 run at the same track but on a different configuration. The first 7 races outside of a dismal 25th at Atlanta saw him 5th in the standings, 9 points behind his fellow teammate Justin Haley. While this was impressive, this was only after the first 7 races of the season, and better things were yet to come, especially with the next race on the schedule. 10 months prior, a Colic racing driver scored their first career win at Talladega. 10 months later, the possibility could happen again with a different driver. The Townhouse would be starting 9th and only had one goal in mind: winning. Even if there was a threat of rain, it's all about being in the right place at the right time. Despite the field mostly running single file in stage 1, the next stage was the complete opposite. It was also in this stage that the Townhouse led for the first time, leading 10 laps before getting passed by Austin Cindric. He would get shoveled out of the top 10 with 3 laps to go in the stage, even losing the draft anticipating a big wreck to happen. With the first 2 stages in the books, it was go time for everyone in the final stage. With 33 laps to go, the Townhouse made his move for the lead on Harrison Burton, but doesn't come close. But with enough momentum on the bottom, he is able to stay close to the leaders. And entering turns 3 and 4, the Townhouse makes his final move for the lead. And unlike the previous attempt, he was able to take the lead and keep it for the last 9 laps as Joe Graf Jr. would blow a tire, causing a multi-car wreck in the back. This turned out to be the last caution, as when the field lined up for a restart, a certain moisture that causes cars to lack grip covered not only the Townhouse's onboard camera, but the track as a whole. After that, the cars went down pit road where the race never resumed. And due to the track not having lights, the race was called. Jebediah Townhouse Burton earned his first career win in his 50th career Xfinity Series start. After all the frustration, he finally earns his long-awaited victory in the Xfinity Series. The rest of the season went pretty well for him. While he didn't pull the same results as Ross and finished 10th in points, he still had a good first season with the team. Some of his other notable highlights include him finishing a runner-up to KFB at the final Atlanta race under the old configuration, and being a part of this insane 3-wide finish with his teammates. Overall, it was a good season. However, the partnership between Townhouse and Colic wouldn't last for long, as on October 11th, Townhouse announced that he wouldn't return to the team in 2022. This was shocking. To think that he was having a good season and making the decision to depart the team at the end of the season was really unheard of. So, why was he departing Colic? Well, a month prior, it was reported that Nutrient Ag Solutions would be leaving the sport entirely after the season after executive changes were made at the company. But the thing is, they didn't leave, as they would sponsor Quandale Dingle the next year. Either or, this left Townhouse out of a ride entering 2022, but just like last year, he wouldn't have to wait until the next year to announce his plans. On December 16th, and at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, it would be announced that alongside Anthony Alfredo and Brett Moffitt, he would be driving for Our Motorsports full-time in the number 27 car. The previous year, this fairly new team expanded to 2 cars after buying out the owner points from Raymond Brothers Racing. For 2022, they're expanding to 3 cars, Moffitt remaining in the 02, Anthony Alfredo in the 23, and the 27, driven by Townhouse Burton himself. His season started off with a wrecked car at Daytona after his teammates sent Miami Mite to the moon, but his luck would turn around the next week as he would finish a respectable 14th place finish at California. Throughout the season, he had some top 10 runs, but only had top 15 and top 20 finishes. At Circuit of the Americas, he was set for a solid top 5 finish until gaining a penalty for cutting the course. Granted, everyone was doing that. Then a week later at Richmond, his car came to life in the final laps but was snubbed of a top 10 by Parker Retzlaff, who was making his second start for RSS Racing. He may or may not be important later on. Despite not scoring a top 10, the first half of the season looked very promising. That was until his season peaked in the 13th race of the season at Charlotte, where he rebounded back from a spin to finish 12th. After that race, he was 14th in points, 2 points behind his teammate Anthony Alfredo, and only 60 points behind 12th place runner Ryan Sieg. His run was great, but unfortunately, it would be overshadowed due to what happened the last few laps of the race. Noah Gragson, who had a faster car than the Townhouse, pulled a slide job move on the 27 car, but has to brake to avoid hitting the outside wall, which causes Townhouse to check up and pull a crossover move on Gragson. This pissed off the Townhouse to the point where on the front stretch, he picked up Gregson's rear tires, nearly spinning him out. This resulted in an altercation between the two on pit road. This was something not worthy of getting upset about. And I say this as a former Townhouse fan. Why would you get upset about a racing move when you don't wreck? It just doesn't make any sense. And because of that altercation, the fans viewed the Townhouse in a very different light. Instead of being praised, he was often clowned. And after that race, his season just straight up fell apart. He wrecked out the next week at Portland, and when the Xfinity Series returned to action at Nashville, he would get into a wreck with Sheldon Creed, who called him out on Twitter after the race. But if you think that's bad, it would get even worse. 3 weeks later at New Hampshire, Josh Berry would come down on Sheldon Creed and spins out in front of the field. As he comes up, Ryan Sieg hits Berry on the left side, and all of a sudden, the Townhouse, who couldn't slow down in time, piles drives Ryan Sieg and sends him into the air, almost flipping him over. This was followed up by another airborne crash from you know who. The following week at Indianapolis didn't go well either because, well, he didn't even start the event. During pace laps, the track bar broke and he had to go behind the wall. He was done before the race even started as he wouldn't even complete a single lap. 3 DNFs in 3 weeks. Luckily, Michigan was the first race since Atlanta where nothing happened. No incidents with any other drivers, no stupid moments, just an uneventful weekend where he finished 22nd. Then the next race at Watkins Glen, he would crash out only 8 laps in. At this point, finishing inside the top 20 would be a satisfactory weekend. However, there was a small glimmer of hope after his engine expired at Kansas. He entered Bristol 19th in points after a horrendous summer stretch. This Bristol race would change his luck for the rest of the season. The Townhouse qualified 7th and ran inside the top 10 and top 15 in the first 2 stages, picking up stage points in the process. He was set to finally finish inside the top 10 until a speeding penalty and a long green flag run derailed his chances of getting a top 10. For the rest of the season, he scored top 15s and top 20s, but was unable to capture a top 10 finish. And even with some better runs, his season wouldn't end without some controversy because why wouldn't it? At the Charlotte Roval, Townhouse got turned late by Anthony Alfredo, which resulted in him getting T-boned by Marco Andretti. After the race, the two had a heated exchange on pit road, and unlike the Gragson conflict, you could make a reasonable argument of why he had every right to be upset at Fast Pasta. But his last altercation of the year was the complete polar opposite. Late in the Martinsville race, the Townhouse comes out on Raja Carruth, nearly spinning out and in turn, taking out the 34 of Kyle Weatherman. Why would you come down on someone that has a run on you? Either allow him to have the spot or stay in the middle. Overall, this was a season that damaged his public image. All that people were going to see was a clown blaming Rexel on everyone else except for himself. And while this was a bad season, is this the worst season of his career? As of now, no. 2024 is looking to be worse, but more on that later. Even before the season ended, the Townhouse needed a fresh start. The first step was leaving Our Motorsports at the end of 2022. This once again made him a free agent. He was eventually signed to race for Jordan Anderson Racing alongside Parker Retzlaff on January 4th of 2023. I actually wanted him to race the 21 for Hattori Racing of the Truck Series. Don't ask! When qualifying went on at Daytona, the Townhouse placed 20th on the board, which was better than the 27th from the year prior. However, there is a saying, it's not how you qualify, it's how you finish. He almost didn't even start the race at Daytona due to a dead battery. After it was changed, he got back on track with the superspeedway ace Austin Hill behind him. Hill had a radio issue that was later fixed, but both he and Townhouse would start at the rear. But as the race started, they would make their ways up to the front. While Hill won stage 1, the Townhouse fall behind in 4th place. In stage 1, his car was clean. That was until the final lap of stage 2, where he came down on Anthony Alfredo, causing a small wreck in the process. In stage 3, Townhouse was a non-factor, but thanks to a late race caution, he would line up 11th after choosing the bottom lane on the restart. After Greg Goulding ran out of fuel and after Fast Pasta got shoveled out, Townhouse once again found himself in 11th. And throughout this run, the Townhouse was patient. And even when Sam Mayer got sent on his roof, it looked like he finally scored his first top 10 finish since the fall Talladega race in 2021. That was until the official results were released. Still a good run though. As for the next week in California, no. The first 2 months of the season were an up and down one for the Jebediah Townhouse. On one hand, he started off March by beating Joe Graff Jr. on pace for 14th at Las Vegas. But on the other hand, this was followed up with 3 finishes outside the top 15. Another 22nd place finish at Phoenix, 16th at Atlanta, and a disheartening 21st place finish at Coda after wrecking on the last lap. Entering Richmond, he was 17th in points after 3 weeks of struggle. He would make up those said 3 weeks with a 12th place finish at what was known as the Action Track, and then 14th at the Paperclip the next week, and at this point, he was entering 15th in points, entering the 9th race of the season at Talladega. And this would be a race where the Townhouse came to town. In a race that saw 2 flips, this was one of the most chaotic Xfinity races in Talladega's history. On one hand, the racing was intense and exciting, but on the other hand, it was almost easy for a wreck to happen, especially during stage 3. While Parker was involved in 2 wrecks, the Townhouse managed to stay out of trouble despite some daring moves he made. On what was supposed to be the final restart, Townhouse had control of the race until the exit of turn 4 where Sheldon J. Plankton pulled a bump and run on him and took the lead. But just as soon as he took the lead, Austin Hill happened. The field would bunch up one last time, and on the restart, Townhouse took advantage of this as he would take the lead. All that he needed to do was hold on. And hold on he did, claiming the 2nd win of his career and Jordan Anderson's first win as a team owner. After a disastrous season the year prior, seeing Townhouse win still shows that he's more than a hothead. Would I say he dominated the race like he said in an interview with Eric Estepp? No. But was he a contender all day long? Absolutely. It was not only a significant win for the Townhouse, but the entire team. Because of his win, he would be one of the top 4 to qualify for the Dash for Cash the next week at Dover. While he finished 18th in the race and 3rd in the Dash for Cash battle, getting Jordan Anderson racing into the Dash for Cash was already significant, seeing as this was their first appearance. The next few races went pretty smoothly outside of some hiccups here and there. Beginning with Charlotte 2 races later, where he scored his first top 10 of the season on a non-super speedway since Richmond of 2021. Then the next week at Portland, his solid momentum would get stopped after a feud with Chandler Smith that resulted in a fight on pit road. Afterwards, he proceeded to get fist bumped by Josh Williams. He finished 26th the next week at Sonoma, which was his first finish outside the top 25. Despite these detractors, he would get another top 15 at Nashville, then 3 races later at New Hampshire, he would score his 3rd top 10 of the season. A theme throughout the season was that he would score a top 10 on a different track type, whether it be the big super speedway at Talladega, the 1.5 cookie color miler at Charlotte, the short 1 mile at Loudon, the big 2 mile at Michigan, the road course of Watkins Glen, and the short track of Martinsville, even if his car was totaled in the process. 2023 was a comeback year for the Townhouse. Not only did he win, he also managed to add in some top 10s with strong and consistent top 15 runs. However, that isn't to say that he had a flawless season. Throughout the season, he managed to not DNF. Yes, he spun out and had accidents, but he still managed to rebound and actually finish better. However, things changed at the 2nd race of the playoffs at Texas. At the end of stage 2, the Townhouse reported something was breaking in his car. This something was more than a wheel coming off. It was a noticeably absent axle cap. Because the team couldn't find a backup axle cap, he had to put it behind the wall, and despite this strange mechanical issue, he would get back on track, only for a broken track bar to take him out of the race. This was bad on its own, but it was the interview NBC did that made things worse.
Just careless mistake, to be honest. Shane did a great job making the car better. I think we got up to the top 7 there, coming to the end of stage 2, and pit crew left for a tire loose, had a really bad vibration, and then the tire finally came off. I was limping it around. And then I guess it just probably damaged the track bar pretty bad after that. I just hate it. Me and Shane can't do it all, right?
Personally, I think this is the reason why he's having an awful 2024, but more on that later. 2 weeks later at the Charlotte Roval, after a caution for debris, the Townhouse elected to stay out on old tires as a last-ditch effort to make the round of 8. This turned out to be a bad idea.
Oh, the 27's missing the corner.
and they slam into the wall. It's happened before. We see it again. Allgaier into the wall, and the caution comes out.
Thankfully, Allgaier was locked in, but imagine if he wasn't. Townhouse realized the stupidity of his move and spoke to reporters where he admitted that he was in the wrong, which, you know, I do respect him for that, because I'm pretty sure he realized what he did last year was wrong, so character development. Despite the flaws, he had a good season, finishing 12th in points with 1 win and 6 top 10s. He got Jordan Anderson their first win, their first Dash for Cash, and playoff appearance. That should be celebrated, but because of what he said at the media at Texas, it wouldn't just affect the end of his 2023 campaign, but the next year as well with the same team intact. Throughout the season, the Townhouse has run outside the top 20 in the standings. Whether it be wrecks or inconsistencies, it seemed like karma dealt a bad hand to him. He had good runs like Talladega and Dover, but the thing is, they weren't consistent, which was why he was in that position for over half a season. Even after getting into the top 20 for the first time all season, he found himself back into the deep end after Bristol. Right now, he's currently 21st in points, and things aren't looking good with these recent results. I'm just going to flash up on screen because I'm out of ideas, and also at the same time, he's struggling rapidly. I hope he does well. With all that has happened, the Townhouse is still in NASCAR. Despite sponsors pulling out, despite not having a consistent ride for some time, despite all of his self-inflicted wounds, he's still in the Xfinity series with a team that, despite being badmouthed, still believes in him, even if he's running worse than the year prior. But here's to a better 2025 for Jebediah Townhouse Burton. So that wraps up today's video. This is actually my second time recording this. I edited the script. It was initially 7,000 words, but as I'm looking at this, it is 6,111 words. So yeah, I had to rewrite it. I wasn't proud of how I did the first take of it, which led me to, you know, give up on the first attempt. So I decided to do the second attempt today. And speaking of Townhouse, I will do a full season review of his 2024 campaign because I want to see where he improved and where he didn't improve and where he basically sucked. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all probably in 2 weeks. I have no idea. It depends on how I'm feeling.